Hey, what's up users? This is John at Muse for You, here to help you build awesome websites without code. And in this video, I'm going to go over 10 awesome Adobe Muse tips for beginners, or at least tips that I would have liked to have known before I started using Adobe Muse. So the first tip is creating a circle in Adobe Muse. It's fairly easy. You just select the rectangle tool, you hold down Shift to create a perfect square, and I'll create a square 160 by 160 pixels in width and height. And then to make it a circle, or first I'll fill it, so I'll select the fill option right up here at the top, and I'll fill it with, let's say, orange. And to make this a circle, we just select the corner radius buttons right up here in the toolbar, in the upper toolbar, and we just click on the corners there. And so now the corners have a corner radius of 10, and we can see that the square has, the corners are a bit more rounded. To make it a perfect circle, you just set the 10 to 100. Very good, so now we have a perfect circle and looks good. And then you can just copy this and create a few other circles. And I'll just center that in the middle and looks good. We have perfect circles and we can fill them with any colors we'd like. Very good. And just as a side note, if you make it too big, it'll turn more into a square like that. Okay, so that's the first tip, how to create a circle in Adobe Muse. You just want to make sure that your square isn't too big because it'll turn more into a rounded square like so. All right, that looks good. So the next tip is minifying images and compressing images so that they don't take up a lot of space on your server when you upload your website, so your website isn't like super heavy when you upload it. So just as an example, I have two images here that I got from unsplash.com, and if I look at the properties, so if I right click on this first image, I right click and I click on get info, this image is 2.4 megabytes and the size is 4,225 pixels by 2,376 pixels. Now that's fairly large for a website, and usually, I mean, on a 27-inch iMac, the width of an iMac at the highest resolution would be 2,560 pixels wide. So this image is actually very big, and we don't need it to be this big. And if I look at the second image, if I right click and click on get info, it's 1.9 megabytes, and again the dimensions are really large. It's 4,608 pixels by 3,072 pixels. Okay, and even if I click on the image, we can see that it's really large. Okay, so the first step in minifying images, or making them smaller, is just kind of finding the size that you want for the image. So now if I take these images, and let me just delete these circles here. If I take this first image and I drag it into Adobe Muse, so if we look at the width of this image, it's 2,048 pixels wide, and because it's proportioned to the image, the height is 1,151 pixels in height. So what Adobe Muse does when you place an image that's larger than 2,048 pixels in width, Adobe Muse resamples the image so that it's 2,048 pixels in width. So if we go to the Assets panel, and if you don't see your Assets panel, you can just go to Window and click on Assets to bring it up, and we leave our mouse over it, or we hover over the thumbnail here of the image. We can see that the original asset size was 4,225 pixels by 2,376 pixels, and the resampled asset size is now 2,048 pixels by 1,151 pixels. So that right there, Adobe Muse automatically reduces the size of the image because it knows it doesn't need an image that's that large. So Adobe Muse is doing the first step to really making sure that your images aren't too heavy, but we can even take it a step further to make sure that these images are really lightweight and don't take up a lot of load space or a lot of space on your server when the user goes to your website. Because the last thing we want is a user to wait a long time for images to load when they go to your website. Okay, so that's one thing that Adobe Muse does to resample the image, but you can take it a step further by using a website like compressjpeg.com. Okay, and this is a great website. So if I go to my Finder and let's say I want to resample, or I want to make this image a bit smaller, the first thing that I want to do is resample it in my Finder window, or make it smaller in my Finder window. So to do that, I'm going to right click, open with preview, then I'll go to tools, adjust size, and then here in the width, I'll just set it to 2048 because I know Adobe Muse is going to resample it anyways to that size, so I'll just set it there initially, and we don't need to worry about the resolution. And then I'll click OK. Very good. And then I'll hit Command S to save, or you can go to File, Save. And I'll actually do it for this first image as well, because this is the first image that I showed. So I'll go to Tools, Adjust Size, and I'll say 2048. Very good. And resolution we can leave at 72. So right away, the image was 2.4 megabytes, and we reduced it to 715 kilobytes. So we've we reduced the size by more than half of the image already by changing the size of the image manually on our computer. So I'll hit Command S to save, and then I'll go to File, Save, and perfect. Or Command S to save, or you can go to File and Save to save the image. So there's the image, and now to reduce the size even more, I'll just click, hold, and drag and place here onto compressedjpeg.com. And you can go to compress.png as well to compress PNG images as well. So it reduced it by 36%. So I'll click download, and it'll go to my downloads folder. So I'll just go there real quick, and I'll just drag this in here, and perfect. So now we have the same image, but we have this -min next to it, which is great, which shows me that this image has been minified, or the size has been reduced. So let's see the size of this image now. So I'll right click and I'll click on Get Info, and now this image is 606 kilobytes. So the original was 952 kilobytes. Okay, so it reduced it by about 300 kilobytes. So already we're making our images lighter, and if we place it onto our Adobe Muse website, and we go to Assets, we can see that it doesn't really resample the image, because the original asset size is 2048 by 1152. So it's the same for the resampled asset size, because Adobe Muse doesn't let you have images larger than 2048 pixels in width, and because it is 2048 pixels in width, it doesn't really resample it. Okay, so that's one way to kind of lighten up your images so that they're not so heavy on your website. And one thing that I want to make you aware of as far as resampling these images, it's something that I found out when I was creating a website. So let's say you want an image for the browser fill. You can go to Browser Fill, click on Add Image, and then I've re-downloaded one of the images, and I'll just place it in there. And this is the image before it's been resampled or anything. And I'll take off scrolling here. And if we go to Assets and we hover over the thumbnail, we can see that Adobe Muse didn't resample this image. It's actually 4,608 pixels by 3,072 pixels. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload this to a live server. So I'll do that real quick. So now I want to inspect this website. So I'm going to right click, click on Inspect, and then I'll click on Resources, and I'll go to Frames, and then here I have the Muse for You shop website. I'll go to Images, and then here I have the image. So I'm going to save this image onto my computer. So I'm just going to click and drag into my Finder. Okay, so there's the image. It saved it as Muse for You, image-3-1. So if I right click, Get Info, and we can see that this image is very large. It's 1.9 megabytes, and the size was not resampled. So let's say I'm going to resample this image in my Finder and relink it in Adobe Muse. So let's do that real quick. So I'm going to go to my Finder. So now I'm going to resample the image, and it's right here, image-3. So I'm going to right click, open with, preview, and I'll go to Tools, Adjust Size, and I'll say 2048. And we can see it reduced it by quite a bit. It was 1.9 megabytes, and now it's 507 kilobytes. So I'll click OK. I'll hit Command S to save, or I'll go to File and Save. All right, perfect. And then I'll close this here. And then if we go back into Adobe Muse, we see we have this kind of exclamation point, and it's telling us that the asset has been changed. So I just want to right click and click on Update Asset. All right, so if we go to our assets, we can now see that the image has been resampled to 2048 pixels by 1365. Yeah, it's 2048 pixels in width, and the height is 1365. Okay, so now I'm going to re-upload it to the server. So I'm just going to do that real quick. Okay, so here I have my website again, and now let's take a look at the image. So I'm going to right click, inspect element. I'll go to resources, click on frames, go to Muse Free Shop here, this folder, click on images. Okay, there it is. And now I'll do the same. I'll drag this image into my folder. All right, so here it is, image 3-2. So let's inspect it. So I'm going to right click, get info, and look at that. It's still 1.9 megabytes. Now I found this out by doing kind of a bit of experimenting, because I had an image that was too large, and every time I changed the image and then updated the asset, the image was still the same file size. And now 1.9 megabytes is too large, and I wouldn't want my users or anyone visiting my website to wait for an image to load. So we can see the dimensions are still the same, and the height is still the same, and the size is still the same. Now the reason for this is because Adobe Muse didn't know that the file was changed. It changed it in Adobe Muse, but because when we uploaded it to the server, it had a specific file name, and that file name was not changed, Adobe Muse didn't replace the file. It just said, hey, this has the same file name, and we don't need to replace it with any new file. And I tried it a few different ways. I tried just uploading a completely new from fresh, like, you know, when you go to file upload, instead of saying only modified files, I said, entire site, and it still didn't update this image. So to fix that, one thing you could do is just rename the file that's in Adobe Muse. So I'll just close all these windows. You could just rename the file that's in Adobe Muse, and it would work fine. Or you could also just go to compress.jpg, and I'll just drag it in here. Or let's try that again. I'll just drag this image in here, kind of reduce the size, and then download, and it reduced it by 47%. So I'll just open up my downloads folder and just place that image in here. Now if you notice, the new image now has Muse for You image -3-min. So not only did we reduce the file size even more, we also added an extension -min to this image, so that it now has a new file name. So if I look at get info, the image is now 380 kilobytes, and before it was 711 kilobytes. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is relink this image. So I'm going to go to assets, and here we have Muse for You image -3. So I'm going to right click and click on relink, and I'll just go to that folder, and I'll select image 3-min. So I'll double click here, and now the image is Muse for You image -3-min. We don't really notice any difference in the quality of the picture. If you look really close, you might notice something, but the image still looks really good. So now I'll re-upload this to the server. Very good. So here I have the website, and just to make sure that we have the most latest version of the website, I'm going to hold down Shift and refresh the website. Okay, so that it refreshes everything, and it doesn't save anything in the memory or the cache of the browser. So now I'll right click, inspect element. I'll go to resources. I'll click on frames, then this folder here, I'll go to images, and here I have this image here, and I'll just drag this out. And here you can see it says Muse for You image -3-min. So if I click, hold, and drag and place onto my Adobe Muse website, we can find it here. I just have to look for it. So it's this one here. I don't know why it says 9K equals, but I'll right click, get info, and here we see the size is 380 kilobytes. And one thing that could have saved us a bit of time, I actually didn't realize it, but if we just reduce this size here, we can see the dimensions and the file size. So rather than having to drag it into the Finder, we can just look at the file size here, and we can see that here the file size is 371 kilobytes. So that's just a quick tip. I know when I was working with it, I was wondering, I resampled my image, or I reduced the size of my image. I ran it through compressed JPEG, or actually I just reduced the size, and then I uploaded it to the server, but it still didn't change. So kind of through trial and error, I was able to find out that you actually have to change the name of the image if you make it smaller, so that Adobe Muse knows to re-upload that new file to the server and doesn't use the old file. Okay, so that's the second tip. I know that one was fairly long, but I felt like it was an important one to cover, and I did use that image quite a bit because I dragged it into the Finder a few times. Okay, so that's the second tip. The next tip I'm going to show, and I'm just going to remove this browser fill, is custom links. So, when I'd be working with a website and I had a link, so I'll say, Muse for you, and I'll make the file size or the size a little bit larger and change the font. And then I'll highlight this text and I'll add a hyperlink to it. So I'll say http museforYouShop.com and enter. So now if I preview this in the browser, I go to File, Preview Page in Browser. We can see that this link has a certain color over it. And actually, because I've already done this with my website, if we click here, we click on hyperlinks and we go to edit link styles. I've already edited my link styles. By default, you usually have like, purple, orange, or just a bunch of different colors for these states. But if you change these states for the default link style, you can change how your links look. So I can actually, for the hover, I can say change the color. For the normal state, I can say like orange, and probably doesn't look too good, but I'll click OK, and I'll go to File, Preview Page in Browser, and there my links have changed. So let's say I copy this and I want to assign different link styles for different text. To do that, I'll just highlight this, I'll go to hyperlinks, and then here where it says edit link styles, I'll click there, and then here we have a little icon that looks like a piece of paper. So, and if I hover over it, it says new link style. So I'll click on it, and then I'll just double click here where it says default link style copy, and I'll say new style, or you can name it whatever you'd like. And then I'll just hit enter, and I'll go back to hyperlinks, edit link styles, and we can see that new style, has kind of its own styling here. But yeah, let me go back here, and for hyperlinks, I'll click there, and for text link style, I'll select the new style. And this is how we assign this text that link style. So I'll go to, or actually I'll edit the link style. I'll go to new style, and I'll just make it different colors here. Normal state, like that, visited, like that, active, like that. And you can add underlines. So say if I hover, I want it to be underlined, and looks good. So now I'll go to File, Preview Page in Browser, and we can see that that link is different and this link is different. And we just did that by creating a new link style and assigning it to the text. And if we click on the text, they both take us to that hyperlink, or yeah, they take us to that hyperlink. Very good. So that's how you create new link styles and assign different link styles to different text. And also, if you wanted to edit your initial link styles, you could just go to the hyperlink section, edit link styles, and then for the default link style, just edit this here. And it looks like when I edited it, it added the visited and active state, but you can say none for that, and that'll work just fine if you take off some of the color for the different states. Okay, very good. So that's editing the link styles. Okay, and the next tip is uploading a favicon. So if I go to museforYouShop.com, I hit enter. If you notice, there's this little favicon here. A favicon is a .ico file, and it's just like a 16 by 16 pixel file that goes in the browser. So if you ever go to any websites and you see that little logo in the browser tab, that's called a favicon. And if you want to add your own favicon, you can just find an image, make sure it's a square, or yeah, it should be a square. And it can be like, over 100 pixels by 100 pixels, like let's say 128 by 128 pixels, because Adobe Muse will automatically resize it to 16 by 16. But just so your image doesn't get too, like it doesn't lose that much quality, I would start with a really low size initially for your image. That way Adobe Muse doesn't have to resample it too much, and your favicon will still look good. So to add a favicon to your Adobe Muse website, you just go to File, go to Site Properties, and then here in the Layout section, you want to click on Layout, And then here it says Favicon image. You can just click here on this folder icon that says choose a new image file to use as a favicon. So I'll click there, and then I have a logo here in this folder that I'm working with. It's Muse for You logo here. I'll just double click, and there we can see it added that favicon image for the favicon. And if we look at that image in the Finder, if I right click get info, this image is actually 500 by 500 pixels, and Adobe Muse resized it nicely so that it looks good there. Okay, and that might be a little bit too large because Adobe Muse had to resample it quite a bit, but it still looks good. So I'll go to File, Preview Page in Browser, and now we can see that this browser has the favicon that I've added to it. So you can see Adobe Muse is really good with resampling it down because it still looks really good. But again, I'd start lower so you don't have to really resample that image too much. Okay, so that's how you add a favicon. You just go to File, Site Properties, Layout, and click the folder here and select the image you'd like for the favicon. So the next tip number 5, is adding your menu to the master page. If you have multiple pages on your Adobe Muse website, you don't want to keep adding the menu to every individual page. So what you want to do is go to your plan view in Adobe Muse, and here you have your masters page, and anything you add to your masters page will be added to all your pages on your website. So I'm going to double click on the masters page, and I'm just going to go to Object, Insert Widget, Menu, and click on Horizontal. And I'll just say here Manual so we can add more menu. For the menu type, I selected Manual, and this just allows us to add more menu items to the menu. So if I click here, and I'll just keep adding some menu items here. I'll add 6, and I'll just kind of place it at the top of the browser, like so, and make it a little bit wider there. So there's our menu. So I'll go back to the plan view, and if I go to the home page, we can see that this menu is on the home page, and I can't edit this menu on the home page, and that's because it's on the master page, so any editing would have to be done on the master page. And if I create new pages, we can see that that menu is on every page, and this just makes the workflow a little bit easier and saves you a bit of time, so you don't have to keep copying and pasting the menu on each page. And if you wanted all your pages to have, like, let's say a footer as well, you can add the footer to the master page, and it would be on all the pages as well, or any other element you want all your pages to have, just add it to the master page, and all your pages will have it as well. And you can have multiple master pages, so I just clicked on the arrow to the right here, this plus symbol, and let's say I wanted a B master, so now I have an A master and a B master, and if I wanted to assign the B master to any of these pages, I just right click where it says masters here, I select B master. So now this page does not have a menu at the top. Okay, and if I wanted the A master, I'll just right click and click on A master. So now this page has the A master assigned to it, and it has the menu at the top because the A master has the menu. All right, very good. So that's tip number 5. Okay, and tip number 6 is cropping images manually. I'm just going to delete this menu here because we don't really need it anymore. Okay, and then tip number 6 is cropping images manually. So let's say you have a really large image, so I'll just place this image in here, and rather than, and I'll zoom out by holding Command minus, and rather than resizing it by holding the corners and resizing it like this, let's say you knew exactly how large you wanted your image to be, you can crop the image manually by selecting this icon here below the arrow. It has a hand and kind of the crop tool. So if I click on it, and then I click on the center of the image, the outline turns red, and now I can manually resize this image. So if I go to the width and the height right up here, let's say I want the image to be 500 pixels in width, I just enter 500, and you want to make sure that constrain width and height proportionally is checked. This little link is selected. That way when you resize your image, the width and the height stay proportional to each other, and your image won't look kind of skewed. It'll just look really nice and like it was just resized. So I changed it to 500, and I'll hit enter, and now the image is smaller, but now if we hover over the image, we notice that the image frame is still that original size. So we can just click on the image frame, and then again we change the width to 500, make sure that the constrained proportion is selected. That link is selected down, and then I'll hit enter, and now the image frame is the same size as the image. So now if I zoom in, we have resampled or resized this image to 500 pixels in width, and the height is 281 pixels. and the image looks good. All right, and I'll just center it there. Yep, very good. So that's tip number 6, how to resize an image manually with the crop tool. Okay, tip number 7 is changing the language of Adobe Muse. Let's say you're using Adobe Muse, but you want it in your native language. So to do that, you just go up here where it says Adobe Muse CC. You click on it, and then you click on Preferences. And then for language, you can choose from all these languages here. So let's say I wanted Spanish, I would just select Español here, which is Spanish in Spanish. So I'll click Español, and then I'll click OK. And then here in Spanish, it says you should exit Adobe Muse and then come back in so that it can apply the new language. So I'll click OK. Then I'll click Adobe Muse. I'll say quit Adobe Muse CC, and I don't want to save, so I'll just click Don't Save. And then I'll reopen Adobe Muse. And now we can see that the language is in Spanish. So all my options here at the top are in Spanish. Everything here is in Spanish. If I go to File, New Site, everything is in Spanish. And all my panels are in Spanish, and everything is in that new language. So again, you just go to Adobe Muse CC, go to Preferences, Idioma, that means language in Spanish. You can change to your native language, and there's quite a few here. Very good. So I'll click on English, and you can also change the color theme of Adobe Muse here by selecting kind of a darker color or a lighter color for your Adobe Muse interface. So I changed it back to English, so I'll click OK. Click OK. Again, I have to exit Adobe Muse, and I'll reopen Adobe Muse. Okay, very good. So that was tip number 7, and I'll just create a new site here, and I'll click OK. Very good. So there I have a new site. So now we'll move on to tip number 8. Okay, so tip number 8 is not exporting a certain page. So let's say you have multiple pages on your Adobe Muse website, and you've just been kind of in the creative process, and you've made a few pages that you don't want to upload to the server. So you have, like, let's say 5 pages here, and let's say page number 4 was just kind of an experiment, and you don't really want it to be uploaded to your server. To not have it upload to your server, or to not have it go live on the web, you can just right click on that page, and then here where it says export page, just click on that, and it'll uncheck the page, and the page will become like this darker gray. So if I right click and click on export page again, the page becomes kind of like that original color, or like the lighter color, to show you that this page will be exported. If you don't want it to be exported, just right click and click on export page, and we can see it turns that darker color here, and this page will not be exported or go live on your web server. Very good. So no one will see this page. Okay, so that was tip number 8. Tip number 9 is just dragging and dropping images from Adobe Illustrator. So I have an Illustrator file here. Right here, I'll right click this .eps. I have this .eps file. I'll right click, open with Adobe Illustrator CC, and I have some logos here. And let's say I wanted to use one of these logos in my Adobe Muse website. I could just simply copy and paste into Adobe Muse. So I'm going to delete this background here, and I'll delete this one here. So now I just have that logo there, and I just have to highlight it, and then I'll hit Command C to copy, or Control C if you're on Windows. It's Command C on Mac. So I hit Command C to copy. Now I'll go back to Adobe Muse, and I'll just hit Command V to paste, or Control V if you're on Windows. So now this image is pasted into Adobe Muse, and it's just that easy to paste images from Adobe Illustrator to Adobe Muse. Now this image has been pasted as a SVG file, which is a scalable vector graphic, meaning that if I resize this image, it retains the quality 100%, because it's actually using code to render this image or portray this image, so the quality stays 100%, and you can resize it as small or as large as you'd like, and it'll retain the quality. Now SVG is kind of, I wouldn't say it's becoming the standard, but it is accepted across more browsers now. Almost every browser accepts SVG files, and you can actually do a bit of research. So if you go to caniuse.com and you type in SVG, you can see all the browsers that support SVG. So everything that's in green supports SVG. Internet Explorer 8 doesn't support it, and the Android browser 4.1 and 4.3 don't support it. but for the most part, SVG is widely accepted, and you can use it for your websites. So we have this image here, it's an SVG, and we simply copied from Adobe Illustrator and pasted into Adobe Muse. Okay, so that's tip number 9. And the last tip is replacing assets. So if I delete this, and let's say I take an image, so I'll take this image here of kind of like this frog, and I'll just place it in there. And I'll just resize this a bit smaller. I'll just grab a corner and resize it, and I'll zoom in. Okay, so there we have the image. And what I'm going to do is duplicate this page. So I'm going to right click and duplicate page. So now we have the same image on 2 pages. So if I double click, I have that image there again on the second page. So let's say we're creating a website, and let's say we have pages that have a similar format, but we just want to change the picture. We can easily do that by either right clicking, and then you can say replace image, and then I can find that other image I have in here, and we can see that it replaced that image with this image. And if I go to plan and I go to the different pages, we can see that this image stayed the same, but because we replaced this image, we now have this image in there. So very good. That's how you replace assets or images in Adobe Muse. You can also relink the asset or the image. If you go to assets and you right click on the image, so if I right click and I say relink, I can select I could even select the Muse for You logo. So now that image has changed, I relinked it with another image. Again, I can do it the first way by replacing the image. So if I right click, replace image, and I'll just select that image I had initially, and I'll go to assets, and that image has been replaced. Because it replaced that image that had a specific width, it kind of falls within the width of that previous image. So you just want to make sure that when you're working with it, you just check the width and heights of the image. Very good. So that was tip number 10, and that completes the 10 awesome Adobe Muse tips for beginners. I do have a few more tips that I'll go over in another video tutorial, but this is a good start to wrap your head around some of the things that might not be that obvious when you first start using Adobe Muse. So that's it for this video tutorial, and again, I do this to help you build awesome websites without code. You can visit museforyoushop.com and get access to widgets to enhance your Adobe Muse website. And also in the show more section below are links to other resources. I'll leave a link to the compressed JPEG and compressed PNG down there in the show more section. And also there's also links to museforyoushop.com down there as well. So again, thanks for watching. If you like this video, you can subscribe below, and I'll see you in the next video tutorial.